The moon was high over the Roman Forum on that fateful evening in 32 BCE. The air hung heavy with unease as merchants gathered to exchange coins, their faces strained with uncertainty. Each denarius glinted in the dim light, once a symbol of Rome's might, now a source of growing concern. Traders exchanged whispers of the publicani, the tax collectors who had become both the lifeblood and the bane of the empire. With their contracts coming due and the state's coffers running low, these private contractors became embroiled in a vicious cycle of debt. The practice of tax farming, entrusting revenue collection to private entities, had sown the seeds of a deeper, more corrosive problem: currency debasement. The crisis brewing in that moment was not an isolated incident. Throughout history, empires have risen and fallen, but they do not collapse randomly. They follow a systematic cycle that reveals a troubling truth: the currency dies first, paving the way for broader economic decay. In this exploration of the mechanism behind collapse, we will uncover how tax farming, woven into the very fabric of empires, leads to their downfall. By the end of this journey, you will be equipped to read the warning signs that echo across time. Let us begin by examining the initial stage of this cycle, the era of sound money. For centuries, the denarius was the backbone of Roman trade, minted to a high purity of silver, instilling confidence in its value. Historians estimate that in 27 BCE, the denarius contained approximately 90% silver content. This metallic backing serves as a bedrock for confidence. When money retains its assigned value, economic prosperity flourishes. However, as Rome expanded its territories and engaged in costly wars, the allure of immediate wealth led to borrowing against future tax revenue. The reliance on publicani shifted the fiscal responsibilities of the state onto private collectors, creating a precarious foundation. This burgeoning reliance on tax farming would soon tip the scales toward instability. Compare this to the 16th century, when the Spanish Empire saw an influx of wealth from the New World, especially from silver mined in Potosi. By most estimates, between 1540 and 1600, nearly 200,000 tons of silver flooded into Spain. Initially, this wealth stimulated economic growth. The hard currency reinforced the empire's financial standing throughout Europe. Yet the government's reliance on this silver led to a chronic failure to manage debt responsibly. Excessive spending and the eventual debasement of the coinage began to erode confidence. As Spain failed to adapt, by the late 1600s, the once mighty empire spiraled into financial decline, revealing a critical lesson: empires that rely too heavily on windfalls lose focus on sustainable revenue generation. As Rome's military expenditures escalated, the government turned to tax farmers for immediate liquidity, often accepting upfront cash advances for future tax revenues at steep discounts. The tax collectors became adept at exploiting the system. They were incentivized to maximize their returns, often resorting to draconian measures to extract funds. By 218 CE, the silver content of the denarius had dropped to less than 50%. It was a dramatic stroke of debasement, symbolizing Rome's growing dependence on dubious collection practices. With each new release of coins, the populace was faced with coins less valuable than their predecessors. Trust began to evaporate. When trust in currency wanes, so too does the economic foundation upon which empires stand. This stage of debasement brings us to a pattern seen in the modern world. Consider the hyperinflation of the Weimar Republic in the early 1920s, an event marked by currency collapse due to hefty reparations following World War I. The German government, betting on tax farming and funds, lost sight of fiscal prudence. To pay reparations, the government turned to the printing press, releasing bills at an alarming rate. Historians confirm that inflation rates reached an astounding 29,500% in 1923. The once sturdy paper mark disintegrated into irrelevance. Citizens carried wheelbarrows full of money just for basic groceries. It is a clear modern echo of ancient practices, a desperate state resorting to desperate measures. As the cycle of debasement deepens and currency loses purchasing power, a palpable loss of confidence takes hold. Citizens become wary of transactions. They may hoard wealth in tangible forms, shifting away from the state's currency to barter economies or foreign money. The imperial gaze, once confident and commanding, shifts toward insecurity. When the Ottoman Empire adopted tax farming in the 16th century, it faced a similar crisis of confidence in its currency during the 19th century. As the empire extended its reach, administrators relied on private tax farmers to extract maximum value from a rural populace. Ultimately, the practice fueled corruption and inefficiency, culminating in a severe depreciation of the empire's currency, a clear case where a lack of reliable governance led to a loss of faith. In our modern world, we observe warning signs resembling those historical patterns. One might consider the current reliance of nations on debt accumulation. Many governments engage in aggressive borrowing to fund large-scale initiatives, offering draining financial incentives to private interests. A recent report indicated that global debt reached $226 trillion in 2020, a staggering figure that dwarfs the global GDP. The reliance on debt as a tool, without corresponding fiscal discipline, echoes the historical tax farming mechanisms that precipitated decline thousands of years ago. A pause for reflection. At this junction, one might ask, which empire do you think we are most like right now? How do modern states navigate the precarious tightrope of funding, reliance on private sector efficiency, and the inevitable distress of currency depreciation? Comment below as we continue untangling these historical threads. The cycle, unfortunately, does not conclude with a lack of confidence. The inertia of accumulated public debt creates a further descent into chaos. The debased currency triggers reserve currency decline, as the loss of trust drives people to seek alternatives. Once great empires like Rome faced competition from upstart entities that promised more stable currencies. In turn, these rivals built their own financial systems, rapidly gaining leverage as citizens migrated toward more reliable options. This shift echoes in contemporary times, as the dollar remains the world's dominant reserve currency, yet successive waves of fiscal irresponsibility threaten that status. Many analysts have noted growing chatter over alternatives, cryptocurrencies, digital currencies from central banks, and competing fiat currencies from emerging economic powers. Each race toward reserve status fuels deeper questions. When will confidence erode sufficiently for the American dollar's reign to be contested? Every empire believed it was the exception, an unshakable fortress, impervious to the lessons of failure. However, that self-delusion is precisely the symptom of imminent decline. Historical evidence illustrates this tendency. The failing powers of Assyria and Persia, much like Rome or Spain and the Ottoman Empire, believed in their eternal sovereignty until it crumbled under the weight of their hubris. The same mindset pervades global markets today, as nations dismiss historic economic cycles as mere relics, mistakenly viewing their dominion as a permanent condition. In reflecting upon these cycles, recognizing how tax farming ravages the very foundations of revenue collection, we bear witness to an unchanging ledger that outlasts every flag and every empire. As we navigate our global economic landscape, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. The clock ticks down. The tide rises. The borrowed candle flickers ominously. In every age, the underlying mechanisms remain consistent: debt, debasement, and the loss of confidence represent an unyielding pattern. As we extract lessons from history's vast ledger, we see that the configuration of power, money, and governance weaves an intricate tapestry of human ambition and folly. The great lesson is simple yet profound: confidence in currency is fragile. The mechanism behind collapse is rarely hidden, its signs are observable. Seek out the telltale signs of debasement, the fluttering of state confidence, the hesitant shift toward alternatives. Every great power believed it was different. The ledger disagreed. Subscribe, one collapse decoded at a time.